Now, in considering President Bush's national security legacy, I would like to suggest, first of all, that we Americans are a people of paradox, as Michael Kamen recognized in his Pulitzer Prize-winning book by that title. Americans, Kamen noted, have managed to be both idealistic and materialistic, peace-loving and warmongering, conformist and individualist. The list of paradoxes goes on. The late John W. Gardner, among many others, recognized that Americans live among these tensions between conflicting values and desires. Not the least among them is a profound tension between liberty and security that can be traced all the way back to Hobbes, Locke, and the social contract. I believe Whitney and I have had some great conversations on this recently. The difference between the state of nature and political community is that we give up certain level of this liberty to gain a certain level of security. How much liberty? How much security? We are forever recalibrating, and this is the tension we live with. We find liberty and security side by side in our nation's founding documents. Our history, however, reminds us that the two are more often in tension, especially in wartime, and we all know the history of that tension from the founding forward. We are people of paradox. We understand that we need the government to adapt to ever-evolving threats and technologies in its attempt to provide national security. Yet we are ever vigilant in our defense of civil liberties. This is the tension we live with. Of course, this is a tension that has been heightened in the 8 years since the 9/11 attacks on our homeland, controversies over domestic surveillance and roving wiretaps, over new roles for the NSA and FBI, over internments in Guantanamo Bay. These are the symptoms of that tension. Our executive branch acts in the interest of security. We react in defense of liberty. At times when security threats are heightened and fear reigns, the executive becomes ever more aggressive, and the people often are willing to compromise their civil liberties a little more. Did the Bush administration take advantage of this understanding? Did it manipulate the politics of fear in inappropriate ways? Or did it simply do what was necessary to adjust to the changing context and to prevent fresh attacks upon the homeland? These are the questions we will ask for the next 100 years. After all, these are questions we're still asking about John Adams, Abraham Lincoln, and Franklin Roosevelt, among others. No doubt we will have the same debate about future administrations as we continue to adjust to 21st century threats. Yes, President Bush's record on civil liberties will have an impact on his national security legacy, and yes, the war on terror and wars in Afghanistan and Iraq will be an enormous part of that legacy, likely the predominant part. I would like to say that there are more people here certainly today, more expert on these issues, but I would like to suggest very briefly 3 other areas in which the President has shaped the current state of our national security state. First, his reform of the national security apparatus, which we've already discussed at length, will have an impact on his national security legacy. Much will depend on how the experiment turns out. We have not suffered another 9/11 type attack on his watch. Will that record of success continue? We could also put further privatization of national security under this category of reforms. Under President Bush, Blackwater, for example, has gone from $200,000 worth of contracts in 2000 to $1.25 billion in the next fiscal year. Similar increases have occurred under DOD and the intelligence community since 9/11, really since the 90s, but especially since 9/11. Second, the Bush administration's conception of American power and how it should be exercised will have an impact. Joseph Nye has written at great length about the difference between hard power and soft power, hard power being military solutions and soft power being the more diplomatic. And certainly that we can say that the first term, the president exercised primarily hard power, even if he did so to promote democracy. Secretary of Defense Robert Gates famously complained that we have more members of the military marching bands than foreign service officers. The Bush Doctrine, with its go-it-alone mentality and its justification of preventative war, was a demonstration of hard power. The administration could have cared less, for example, whether or not it received broad international support for its foray into Iraq, and has been accused of showing little regard for international governmental bodies, such as the UN, or international agreements, such as the Kyoto Protocol. Ivo Daalder has noted the ideological underpinnings of the Bush administration's conception of power. The national security team of Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, and Rice based their strategies on the belief that, quote, American power was enough to make our country secure, that international institutions were vehicles that Lilliputians used to tie down the American Gulliver. not tools for amplifying American influence, and that the United States was a uniquely just great power, so that reassertion of American authority would be welcomed, not resisted. Much has changed from 2006 to 2008, during which time, for example, we saw President Bush initiate high-level negotiations between Secretary Rice and her counterpart in North Korea. He began working through the UN Security Council to develop a diplomatic approach to Iran, and he opened the door for a timetable for withdrawal of U.S. combat troops in Iraq. Much has been made of this change in strategy, and in many ways we have seen a new Bush administration in the second term, but nevertheless, its initial conception of American power, particularly in the first 6 years, will be a major part of the Bush legacy. Third and finally, opportunities the president has failed to embrace may affect his legacy. In 2006, President Bush gave a high-profile speech on energy independence, and many buzzed that this was Bush's Nixon to China moment, the moment when the Texas oil man could break America's oil addiction. Little has been done in this area since, and James Jones comes to office in 2009 as President-elect Obama's national security advisor, promising to make energy independence the #1 priority of the national security, or one of the #1 issues. Much has been made, too, of the president's failure to take advantage of the world's sympathy after 9/11 to assume a role of global leadership. Retrospectively, many have said that an opportunity was squandered after 9/11 and after the full consequences of the subprime mortgage crisis became apparent years ago to at least initiate truly significant economic reforms. In these and other areas, President Bush may be accused of missing certain opportunities to bolster our national security. But the national security state, to which the Truman and Bush administrations gave considerable shape, is forever a work in progress, and of course, we understand that the apparatus is animated by decisions. No doubt we will have many shifts in priority under President Barack Obama, and in fact, we've already seen Secretary of Defense Robert Gates in the latest issue of Foreign Affairs writing about striking a new balance in the national security strategy. We will watch intently. Thank you.